Coda movie recap. Welcome to our channel. In today's video, we'll be going through a comedy drama and musical movie from the year 2021 titled Coda. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. Ruby Rossi is a senior in high school and is the deaf family's lone hearing member. Her family Frank, mother Jackie, and older brother Leo are members of the family with whom she resides. She liked to sing while working on her father's fishing boat alongside her father and brother. She also helps out in translating conversations to her family so as to support the family business. Ruby spends her day at school with her best friend Gertie, where she is teased by some of the other students for smelling like fish and having a deaf family. High school is the place where many find their first love, and her first love was Miles. So since she had a thing for Miles, she signed up for choir as she had signed up for it too. Back to Ruby and her family, Ruby drives her parents to doctor appointments after school as her parents suffered from a jock itch. In translating her parents' jock itch, she felt completely embarrassed. Things got all the more embarrassing when she had to translate to her parents that the doctor had told him that they are not allowed to have sex for 2 weeks. Well, they didn't appear to be happy about it. Let us take a step back from that scene now and take a look at what is happening at Ruby's school. Mr. Villalobos, the music teacher, has each pupil performing the happy birthday song so he may evaluate their voices. When Ruby's turn comes, she becomes overly nervous and emotional and flees the room. She walks to the edge of the cliffs and sings alone. Ruby was having a hard day, and on returning back home, the conditions at home were not peaceful. When Ruby returned home, she found her parents squabbling about money, credit cards being denied, and bills piling up. In short, things were not going well for Ruby's family, and soon more problems were about to pile up. At the docks, all of the fishermen were told that they would have to pay $800 a day out of pocket for federal observers to come and ensure that they are following all of their requirements. This was extremely frustrating for all of the fishermen who claimed they cannot afford it. Ruby was going through a lot and decided to fix at least one thing in her life that would make her happy. So she decided to give the choir another chance and return to Mr. Villalobos to explain her position. She claimed that others made fun of her when she was younger and that she was nervous when her vocals being judged. So Mr. Villalobos decides to give her a chance and is blown away when he finally hears Ruby sing. He eventually chooses her to perform a duet with Miles during the fall concert. He tells them that they should practice together. Ruby is happy and on cloud 9. But things at the docks are still bad, and she's soon met with shocking facts. Ruby finds out that Leo is selling the fish for less than they are worth at the docks and confronts him about it. Back to Ruby's dream come true, Mr. Villalobos has Ruby and Miles sing their duet at school. They were completely out of step since they were practicing independently rather than together. Furthermore, Ruby's social life was a complete disaster. She didn't have any male friends. Mr. Villalobos instructs them to work together in practice until they're both on the same page. Mr. Villalobos inquires about Ruby's plans after graduation. He also tells her that he was preparing Miles for Berkeley's audition by coaching him. Ruby claims that she will not be attending college because her family cannot afford it. Mr. Villalobos asks Ruby how she feels when she sings, and Ruby simply responds with a sign. Mr. Villalobos sees great potentials in her and offered to tutor her in order to help her prepare for the audition. She tells him not to waste his time, but eventually agrees to his offer. Ruby's mother does not look happy when she learns about this, which hurts Ruby's feelings. Meanwhile, Leo came up with the notions of forming a fishery cooperative to sell their catch. Frank, on the other hand, believed it would never work because the other fishermen felt he was a joke. Angry, Leo joins the fishermen in their neighborhood tavern, but finds it difficult to interact with them. He gets into a bar fight after someone pours their drink on him. Gertie, a bartender, engaged him in conversation. They end up making out in the back room after speaking via text. Back to Ruby, Miles arrives at Ruby's place for the duet rehearsal. The two sing back to each other, slightly uneasy and unsure where to gaze. It was going well until the noises of Frank and Jackie having sex disrupted it. Ruby had to stop them because she felt ashamed. When their parents forced them to have a sex chat, she felt even more ashamed. When Ruby was compelled to translate it for Miles, the humiliations became even worse. Other students at school began making jokes about Ruby's parents. The news spreads like wildfire. She confronts Miles aggressively, accusing him of spreading lies. Miles claims he only informed one person, but Ruby was furious. Ruby works on her piece, Johnny Mitchell's Both Sides Now. During practice, she seemed tight and depressed. Mr. Villalobos encourages her to express her emotion through singing. Back at the docks, the ongoing matter was brought up by a council to the attentions of the fishermen. Frank eventually rises to his feet and expresses his rage, which Ruby translates. He gives the council the middle finger and decides to to use Leo's suggestion. He announces that they are forming their own group and requests that everyone bring their catch to them. He pledges to sell it for twice as much. Meanwhile, Ruby starts working full-time on a new business, handling all of the translating and maintaining her hectic practice routine. Mr. Villalobos is irritated with Ruby because she is frequently late. He threatens her that if she is late one more time, he will terminate her employment. Miles comes across Ruby and tries to tell her his story. In fact, he respected Ruby's family for loving one another, unlike his own. His parents were divorced, and he was always pushed to perform better. A news cruise arrived at this new family business venture to interview Frank and Jackie. Ruby was required to translate, but she was running late for her practice session. Jackie yells at her that she is not permitted to go. Ruby, she claims, has abandoned her. Ruby waits and translates for the interview before rushing to Mr. Villalobos' home. He doesn't answer the door because he's fed up with Ruby not being committed. She goes to meet him the next day at the school for an apology. He, on the other hand, refuses to collaborate with her. Ruby tells her family how much she enjoys singing at home. She had a large dispute with the family about how taxing being their life interpreter is. Later, Jackie and Frank debate about Ruby's going to college, with Jackie opposing it because she fears she would be a bad singer. Ruby skips work the next day, enraged with her family. Meanwhile, the observer arrives to keep an eye on Frank's yacht. Ruby and Miles, on the other hand, hang out and swim together. They end up kissing. The observer began asking a few questions in the middle of the ocean. Frank understood this and wrote in her diary that she was deaf. The Coast Guard began after this yacht as it entered international waters a few minutes later. The sirens are not heard by Frank or Leo. The Coast Guard forcibly boarded the boat and took Frank into custody. Frank's license was suspended and he was levied heavily. He couldn't pay back his money without getting back on the boat. Only if he hired a hearing deckhand was he allowed back on the water. Jackie claims that they can't afford to hire one right now. Ruby, according to Frank, may be their permanent deckhand. Ruby was levied for the whole thing. Ruby is overcome with emotion when she realizes she is to blame. When Frank claims he'll sell the business, Ruby agrees to forego her college education. She pretended to be enthusiastic. When Leo realized this, he became enraged and rushed away. Jackie buys Ruby a gorgeous dress for her concert and tells her that Leo is just lonely. Ruby claims she's the one who's been left out. She asks if Jackie ever wishes she was deaf. Jackie says she felt insanely happy when she discovered that Ruby was not deaf. Later, Ruby takes part in the graduation ceremony. The family is unable to hear Ruby perform, but Gertie assures them that she is doing well. Following that, Mr. Villalobos introduces himself, mistakenly saying F you in an attempt to express pleasant to meet you in sign. He informs them that not allowing Ruby to attend college is a big mistake. This session is not translated by Ruby. Frank, on the other hand, detected Mr. Villalobos' involvement. After the concert, Frank inquires about Ruby's song and requests that she performs it for him. Ruby's entire family attends her Berkeley audition the next day. Ruby's family is told they are not permitted to enter the auditions room with her. Ruby learns she hasn't brought her sheet music to the audition. When Mr. Villalobos comes and offers to accompany her, she is unclear about how to proceed. Mr. Villalobos intentionally messes up the piano to allow her to restart. Ruby performs both sides now, while singing the words. As her family enters the theater from the top row, the music is enjoyed by all. Ruby's parents decide not to ruin her future and Frank trains a new hearing deckhand so as to continue with his business. Jackie develops friendships with the other wives as well. Miles picks up some basic sign language so as to communicate with Ruby's family. As Gertie drives Ruby away from Berkeley, she says her goodbyes to her family. It's a three-letter phrase in which the letter I-L-Y, which stands for I love you, are represented by the thumb, forefinger, and little finger. The movie ends as Ruby adds the letter R to the phrase by crossing her middle and index fingers, making it I-R-L-Y, which means I really love you.